How you doing, guys? Eric from RuleTheWasteland.com. If you've been watching my channel for any significant amount of time, you probably know that as much as I like talking about the apocalypse and shit-the-fan scenarios, I enjoy movies and sometimes TV shows as well. So the best of both worlds is movies and TV shows about the apocalypse. And I actually have a series, like a playlist of videos that I've done watching, going over disaster, shit-the-fan, apocalypse movies, finding out what I would have done in similar situations, see if there's any lessons to be learned from the things that happen in the movie, the choices the characters make, etc. And obviously I always make the disclaimer that of course it's just movies, but it doesn't mean that there aren't things that you can, use in them to plan ahead, to envision scenarios that you might not have otherwise. Because I know I've talked about this before, but anytime you have to make a decision, your mind goes through the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. And if you can shorten any of those steps by planning or even thinking about certain scenarios ahead of time or similar scenarios, when that comes up in real life, you might not have to go through the entire process because you would have already at least envisioned or thought about similar situations, thought about what you would do in that situation, maybe even planned ahead and taken precautions from a preparedness point of view. So, the one that we're going to go over today is a new show that you may or may not have heard of. Basically a zombie show called The Last of Us, although in this particular show it's like a fungus, not a virus, but that doesn't really matter. This was a apparently really popular video game. I don't really play video games almost ever, so I have no idea about like any of the lore or anything, the story or anything. I'm only exclusively knowing what's happening in the show, so I don't know anything that the show doesn't want you to know, because I'm coming at it from the perspective of a complete newbie, not a nerd who sits inside and plays video games all day. Oh, nerds! 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 But that doesn't mean we can't go through and see if there's any interesting preparedness lessons and scenarios to be thought of. So as always with these, there will be definite spoilers if you haven't seen it yet, so I definitely recommend if it's something you're interested in watching, go watch it first before watching this video, because I'm going to be talking about specific plot points and things that happened throughout the first 2 episodes of the show that have aired so far. And if you don't want to know, have that stuff spoiled for you, then you should go watch it first. Sorry for the weird cuts. This is the 3rd time making this video. Do it all 3 ways. 3, 3, 3. This is the 3rd time making this video. I've been having all sorts of issues with my camera. The universe just is perfectly fine having nothing I do ever work, but we'll do it one more time. So, and then I'm giving up. So if you're seeing this, it means I finally got it to work. So the first episode, it starts off with them having like a brief intro talking about the fungi and how certain types of fungi, it's like back in the 60s, somebody talking about it, about how certain types of fungi can like take over insects and make them do things to lead us into the storyline of some sort of mutant fungus getting into humans and causing zombies, basically. So I've never played the game, so I don't know the rules of these type of zombies, but we'll probably figure that out as the show goes on. So it starts off with, we got our main dude who's basically some kind of contractor, and he's got his somewhere around 13 or 14-year-old daughter and his brother, and this is back in 2003 as the opening. And it's kind of funny because I think the actor's like 46 and he's supposed to play like 36 and then like 56, so he's actually right in the middle. They try to make him a little younger than he is in the beginning, and then they add a little gray for the later half or the remainder of the show, because I'm assuming it'll keep jumping back. But anyways, so you just have a little BS, a normal show type setup, until you get to the point where he has to leave to go pick up his brother, like got arrested, and he has to go bail him out, and he has to leave his daughter. She's like asleep at like it's like 11 or midnight or something like that. And back then, he has like an old brick Nokia type phone for like his landscaping business, but the kid doesn't appear to have a cell phone, which is pretty normal for the time. I didn't have a cell phone until I was like in college, but so it was not a good idea for his character to leave without telling her where he was going. So even in a non-disaster scenario, you'd want to have some way of communicating that didn't rely on electronic communications. Doubly now, like these phones, we rely on them way too much for texting, calls, even the GPS, knowing where we are, pretty much anything. So have some sort of method of alternate, even if that's a place that you're always going to leave notes on the fridge saying, hey, this is where I go, this is where I think I'm going to be back, this is what to do if I don't come back at that time, etc. And that's doubly important for any sort of disaster scenario. So not only should you have something like that for your house, but you should have a secondary location, like a rally point. Like, if I can't go back to the house, this is where I would go to meet you, or at least leave some information. And then you could have primary and secondary options for that. So that was the first kind of mistake they made, but not something that would come up normally as a big issue in everyday life, but can certainly be useful and prevent all sorts of problems. So while he's gone, the girl kind of wanders over to old invalid neighbor's house and sees that the old, what was previously a wheelchair-bound lady, is now like up and about and like eating people's faces off. So as she runs out of there, just so happens that the dad and the brother pull up. Dad clocks her in the head with a wrench, and they jump in the car to get out of there. So there's a couple things that come up at that point. And first off is that the brother at least has a gun. They only have one gun. It appears to just be a bolt-action hunting rifle of some kind. If you're in any sort of major disaster scenario, you want to be ready to be like kitted up, and because you don't know what you're facing. Now the caveat is that you don't necessarily want to automatically go full commando, and not commando in the sense of not wearing anything, but commando in the sense of wearing everything, to where if you don't really know what the scenario is, full on, full kit with your plate carrier or your bulletproof vest with your mags and helmet with nods and whatever, drop leg holsters and stuff, full on gear, that might not be the best option either, because you don't know what you're running into. You don't know if it's like an invasion or the police or a terrorist event of some kind, where the police are going to see this crazy kid guy and blow you away, or where you'll be viewed as a target, what kind of laws may or may not still be in place and what you would be breaking by doing that. But you do want to have the ability to like rapidly up your level of defense and offense. So you want to have options for doing that in like a halfway gray man style too, which would be concealable holsters, concealable body armor, at least typical OWB holsters and things like that won't make you look like a full-on special forces guy or something, or mercenary, but you want to have those options ready to go as quickly as possible if you need to go up that chain. So obviously all they have is one weapon, no sort of protective gear, they don't know what they're facing, and that leads me to the second point, which is their first decision is basically to get out of there, to get somewhere outside the city. Now they're not in the city per se, they're in the suburbs, and I know a lot of people have different opinions about bugging out, but just automatically bugging out at like the first sign of anything is not the best way to do it in most scenarios, because you don't know what you're facing. And especially in a situation where it's like a virus or a disease or some kind of biological weapon or contamination, just going out exposed without knowing what you're facing, potentially facing other people, potentially getting deeper into the contaminated zone, you don't know. So just running off half-cocked is not the smartest solution. I think you should always have it as like a primary plan to set up a defensive position until you figure out more about what's going on. If you do have some specific reason to leave your area, then that makes sense, but you don't just want to be like, something crazy is happening, let me leave, because you could be going to somewhere worse. You don't know what's going on. But they do decide to drive out of there, and at the very least, they're in a pickup truck. Don't know if it's four-wheel drive or not. I don't think it probably is just a standard pickup truck with like extended cab, which is great for, it's a lot better than a regular car. Obviously anything with four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive would be better for most disaster scenarios, because it's almost never going to be a hindrance, with the exception of maybe, getting lower gas mileage. But beyond that, clearance is something that would come into play a lot. So even like a two-wheel drive truck, even though technically it might not have any more ability to get through an obstacle than any other two-wheel drive vehicle couldn't either, it will have an ability to go places just on clearance that a two-wheel drive car couldn't. Like even a simple divider and a median, if the traffic's blocked and you need to bust a U-turn where you're not supposed to normally, and there's just, something as simple as a parking divider, a little 6-inch median with grass in the middle, a bush of some kind, you want to be able to get over that, whereas even if a car has plenty of power to do that, the clearance might get it stuck on there, or God forbid you have to drive over hordes of zombies or whatever, you could easily get stuck on stuff with a normal car a lot more easily than you could with a truck or an SUV. Even if it is two-wheel drive, you have more weight, you have more clearance, so that's better. Obviously having a full-on four-wheel drive type vehicle with brush guards and everything would serve you the best, but that's not necessarily within the realm of possibility for everyone. But as with everything, there's tiers. So if you're worried about bugging out type stuff, then the more capable a vehicle you can get, the better. So they eventually do utilize some of those capabilities by they see the road is all jammed up and they decide to go off road for some portion where they're eventually blocked by like military and stuff. But that brings up another point, is you want to have your primary routes and secondary routes already picked out for when you do need to bug out or get out of town. And you can't, you should still have knowing, what roads you would use if you're going to use roads, because there could be plenty of situations arise where you realize this need arises, not everyone else has yet, or something similar. But in a situation where everyone already knows that shit's going crazy, you're in the thick of it, the roads are probably not going to be the best bet, so you should have alternate either backup roads or off-road type avenues if possible, and even on foot, ones that are only for on foot or motorcycle or whatever, just so you have options if those things ever come about. So eventually they come back off the off-road into like an alley, and there's like throngs of people everywhere. And this is another situation where having a bigger vehicle would come into play if you did ever have to plow through people, which obviously these are mostly innocent people. Could be a different scenario where that's not the case. And also they don't really know what's going on. And the mistake they make is just stopping. Like regardless of whether it's an ambush that you're actively being attacked or just crowds of people, you never want to completely stop if you can avoid it. Because you can even drive at 5-10 miles an hour and just start pushing people out of the way. But once you come to a stop and you're surrounded, that's just bad news. And alternatively, you don't want to just ram people full speed, because most vehicles aren't going to be able to handle that very well either. And not to mention, you would most likely be murdering innocent people. But even if that were in a situation where it would just be justified or they weren't innocent, you can't just ram humans at like 30 miles an hour without destroying your car. Especially modern cars that would have airbags go off. The vehicle might be, electronically disabled at that point. It might not let you drive. You could crack the radiator, break the headlights, damage the steering and any sort of linkage components that are under there from just getting busted up. So you don't just want to just smash through stuff, especially if you don't have ram bars or brush guard or a big steel bumper. But even if you do, it's not the best bet. But it's good to have that as an option. So they shouldn't have just stopped, where they kind of get snarled up in that, where they should have just continued to move, albeit just kind of slowly honking their horn, letting people know that we're moving whether you like it or not. And most of the time, hopefully people, unless they're completely consumed by panic, would probably get out of the way. But before they can worry about that, like an airliner crashes behind them, blows everything up, and they've already come across a few instances of fire. Well, it's very important. That's why it's very important to have fire extinguisher in your kit, even if it's just a little one like this. In a car kit, I would certainly have a bigger one. Put link in the description, or even the fire blankets, which I've mentioned before. Those can be reused, and a first aid kit, because his daughter is hurt in this crash. We don't see exactly what happens. It just, there's a giant explosion. Her leg is injured, like her ankle, so she's still awake, still mostly physically fine, but she can't like run. So the brother somehow gets like separated from them to where, I don't know exactly, it's kind of weird how the shot's set up to where it looks like there's wreckage blocking. Like he's in an alley and there's flaming wreckage, or for some reason they can't get around it. So he says he'll meet him somewhere later. Even more reason why it's more important to have predetermined like rally points set up. Like what if you couldn't find, you didn't see where he went, you couldn't hear each other or something like that. So you know where you would meet if you do get separated, and have alternate for that as well. But they kind of shout each other a location. He grabs his daughter, who, I looked up the actress, she's like 90 pounds. So that'd be better, but still, most people aren't in good shape enough to carry a 90-pound person or 90-pound burden of any kind. Could you do it and then run with it from zombies? You should probably try it, because it's a lot harder. As easy as it may seem to pick up somebody who weighs 100 pounds, running with them is a different story. And but it's something you probably should be able to do. But what he does do wrong is carry her like a sack of potatoes, or like a child, basically, where she is, like I said, she is conscious, so she should have at least done like piggyback style. Not only is it easier to run, but he would have his hands free. But what he really should do is, they've actually had, what's probably the best way to carry someone, especially when there's that much of a size disparity, is that they have this like weird sport. I think it started in like Scandinavia somewhere, called like wife carrying championships or wife races, where I don't know if it necessarily has to be your wife, but it's a man and a woman duo who do these races, like an obstacle course where the guy carries the woman and they have to run this course. And what they've kind of found out as a dominant strategy is for the woman to like kind of do piggyback, but like upside down. So like her ass is up by your head, legs coming over your shoulders, and then she reaches under your arms and grabs her own leg. So it's like a reverse piggyback, and that way the weight is up on your shoulder, your arms are free, the bouncing is limited, and like I said, the weight's at mostly around your shoulder, so it doesn't throw you off too badly. And if you could figure that out quickly enough, that'd be way better. You could actually run like that, climb over stuff if you need to, and like I said, most importantly, your hands are free, which his are not. So he's being chased by the zombies is pretty much doomed, and then just gets very lucky that like a military guy is there to shoot the couple zombies. But his luck quickly turns as they figure out that the military guy has gotten orders to like waste any civilians, to not let them escape because they don't know what the disease is, which is certainly something that could happen if the government starts panicking. That's why I don't trust the government or any official sources of authority now. If there was an apocalypse, forget about it. I might just take them out on sight. Joking. But it definitely becomes a threat for them. The guy does shoot them. It ends up killing the daughter, and he gets injured. And right when he's about to get killed, the brother shows up and kills the army guy and saves the day, basically, albeit his wife or his daughter is dead. So definitely ends badly. But at that point, once they've taken out the army guy, I'm like, if this cuts to the next scene and he doesn't have that select fire M4 and the whatever gear that guy has and the Humvee, which those are push start, you don't even need a key for those things. I'm like, I'm gonna be super pissed, because that's always a thing in these movies where they just leave all these amazing, they'll like come up and hit somebody with like a fire extinguisher and, you know, it has like an AK, and they'll drop it, and not only do they not pick up the AK or something, they'll like leave the fire extinguisher too and run off, and I'm just like, oh my god. So like just abandoning incredibly valuable resources is always a thing in these. And so I was like, you better not fucking leave that weapon. But then jumps forward like 20 years. And so we don't get to see if he took it or not. So I'm going to assume that he was not, and took the M4 and the Humvee and the gas mask and the body armor and all the LCE and everything else they could get out of that thing. And that's pretty much where the first one leaves off. And then it jumps forward like 20 years into like the current future. And I'm hoping they'll go back a lot, because I really like the apocalypse type stuff that happens at the very beginning of the whatever the shit the fan scenario is, and seeing how people react and deal with it then. Like an apocalyptic wasteland dystopian afterworld is still can be entertaining and interesting, but it's not nearly as interesting to me as during the initial stages of whatever the disaster is. So I'm hoping and expecting that they'll continue to go back and show us little snippets of the actual event itself to introduce new characters and story elements and stuff like that. So alright, so I don't know where the last clip left off exactly, because I've been having a lot of trouble with my camera. This is the last time I'm going to try this video. I would film the whole video and then the file would be corrupted. I switched memory cards, so if that doesn't do it, then that's it. I'm done. So if you're seeing this, it means it worked, and I will continue on to episode 2. I think I was near the end of episode 1 on that first clip. So we can begin talking about episode 2. So they're leaving this compound that was run by the localized federal government, federal agents, or whatever they are in this context. We don't know exactly what the setup is, but they have to leave to take this girl to whatever the predetermined location is where the rest of the rebellion forces are. And so they're moving through some of the ruins of the old world. And that's one thing I do like, is that, in some of the episodes of The Walking Dead, especially like not even earlier on, but it's supposed to be several years after the zombie apocalypse, and they would still have clips with like a mode easement, which was just kind of like, and it would snap you out of it a little bit, but, maybe nitpicky. But in this one, while of course the backgrounds are probably all CG and everything, they do a really good job of making it look like what you would expect a city to look like 20 years after being suddenly abandoned. But what that does bring up, or what it would actually cause in a real world situation like that, abandoning everything at once, is that there would be a lot of stuff there that could be useful. Now, this is a long time after the event, 20 years, so certainly there would have been some kind of scavengers. In fact, that's one of the things that they showed him, is he's like a smuggler. He'll go under the wire when he's not supposed to and, try to bring stuff back in. But in a situation like this, where you have very limited manufacturing, very limited travel, certainly resources would be way tight. There's certain things that would just be like, really anything would be incredibly valuable. Like, think of how hard it would be to make stuff out of like plastic, or even to make certain types of clothes and just make anything really. So the idea of like abandoned stuff would be so useful. And there's a couple things in this episode where they just, and this happens always in these shows, and I don't know if it's just me, a personal thing, where like them abandoning or leaving resources just really like this triggers me, for lack of a better word. And there was one part early on in this episode where they're like wandering through a hotel, and there's like a cart there, it's like water everywhere too, but there's like a cart with a couple suitcases on it, and they just leave them there. And I just couldn't stop thinking. I was like ranting to my girlfriend for the rest of the episode about how all the different things that could be in a simple suitcase that would be so invaluable in a world like this. Like, think of what a pair of shoes would be worth in a world 20 years into an apocalypse. A pair of sunglasses, nail clippers, any clothing, hygiene products, that any of the kind that would last 20 years. Just literally anything. If it was a check bag and you're lucky enough to find like a pocket knife or something, there's just so many things. But even something as simple as t-shirts and underwear, a pair of socks, like think of what that would be worth. And they just like wander by, they don't even look into stuff, and I'm like, oh, it freaks me out. So obviously they're not going to add all the mundane realities of an apocalypse into a show like this, but you would have to be able and willing to utilize resources like that if you were going to survive in a situation like that. And so it really was like, so it bugged me, because I would be all over that stuff. Another thing that I've thought of while watching the show is that since the apocalypse happened in 2003 in their world, some technology definitely would have stagnated. Like they're using flashlights, and for the most part I think it shows, them having like the big mag light style flashlights, but I'm thinking about how flashlight technology has improved since then, and he's got like a weapons light on his AR in this episode. And I know they had weapons lights back then, but I'm thinking of even like the batteries. Then the LED technology has improved so much that I don't even think you would really be able to keep one operating, because you would probably need these special types of batteries. I don't think back then it was as nearly as common to have these weapon lights run effectively off of like AAAs and AA's or rechargeable. And even if they did, in this universe, like how readily available are batteries? The whole first episode is about him trying to find a car battery, a 12-volt battery that worked, and he couldn't get his hands on one. So like a little batteries like that. The rechargeable kind were very rare, if they were even commercially available at all in 2003. I'm sure they existed, but you could not go to Walmart and buy like lithium rechargeable batteries, as far as I can remember, in that size. So they only just had the lead acid Duracell type battery. So it'd be, and if a weapons like that might have used the special kind to try to get more juice back then, because they might not have even been nearly as efficient, maybe not even LED at that time. I know that a lot of the super bright lights, like I had a Surefire back then, and they were like little halogen bulbs at the time, because the LED technology was just not as good. So I don't know how realistic that is to have a little weapons light that you got from 2003 working 20 years after an apocalypse, but we'll go with it. And they also come across like a military looking vehicle, kind of like an LMTV or FMTV. I don't know when those first came out. I wasn't, exposed to them until around 2007 or 8, but they must have obviously existed before them. I don't know exactly when they switched over from like the deuce and a halves and stuff, but I would definitely be scouring all these military vehicles and everything for anything useful. And that's one of the things that drove me crazy the most in this episode, was that they come across a place where the resistance guys were supposed to be or were holed up, but they're all dead. They got overrun by the zombies, the fungi zombies. But they, when they're about to leave, like some crate knocks over or something, because all the zombies are about to, and like 12 like hand grenades spill out, and they fucking left them. Oh, you know what I would do for a hand grenade right now? Forget about 20 years into an apocalypse. That thing would be, to say it would be worth their weight in gold, a force multiplier like that probably couldn't even be made anymore, at least not nearly as effectively. Like what 10 or 12 grenades would be worth, especially if you're having to fight feds or groups of zombies. Like, oh my god, like to leave a fucking grenades rolling around. I don't know, man. That one might be hard to get over. And then one of the characters is bitten by the zombie, and like I said, this is still 20 years in the apocalypse. They still always get bit on the hand, or the arm, the leg, or the neck. Like trap area, and they never wear anything. It'd be super simple to wear some sort of leather cowl or chainmail or plastic, motocross armor or anything in those areas, and be basically impervious, because even if these are like souped up, we don't know all the rules to these types of zombies yet, but even if they're like more powerful than humans and more strong and everything and resilient, we're still talking about like human jaw, human teeth, and like if you had a big leather like welding mitt style or chainmail, like those teeth are not going to penetrate through that, and so it would be pretty good protection to have them. They could be gnawing on your arm while you blast them or stab them or do whatever you have to do. So that for them to never have those precautions always blows my mind. And anyway, so they're leaving. The one character that gets, of course, bit dumps out these fuel containers to try and like roast all the zombies, and is using like a Zippo to try to light it. And I think it's unrealistic because the fuel's like dumped everywhere, and assuming that this is maybe diesel and not gasoline, because if it was gasoline, that room would be so full of fumes that a couple sparks would just blow it up anyway. But it's like not lighting, and they're like, oh no. But all that a Zippo is a wick soaked in lighter fluid that the sparks light. So if a spark can light a wick soaked in lighter fluid, it can certainly light entire room soaked in diesel. There's no need to do it up here and get a flame going to touch it. You could just get right down by the diesel and set a couple sparks off on next to a soaked, like your own soaked clothing or something, and it would almost certainly probably light. Like I said, especially if it was actual gasoline, then it would the whole room would probably blow up just from the fumes. But it doesn't really change the storyline. That's just something interesting that stood out to me. So at the end of it, they are just leaving that zone, leaving all the military equipment behind, including the grenades. Oh my God. And we don't know where they're necessarily headed after that. So definitely an interesting show. I do like it. Like I said, I don't know. I'm not into the game, never played the game. I don't know the lore or the rules of the zombies, so I only know what they're telling us in the show. And so far, it seems like pretty standard zombie rules, with the exception of there's kind of like a hive mind element to them, because it's all part of like this one fungus plant, or strain at least. But fun to watch still, and point out the things that you could learn or would do in a disaster scenario. So let me know what you guys think. Sorry if this one's if I'm a bit addled for this. Like I said, it was like the third time trying to film this, so it's in multiple sections and whatever. But still fun to watch. I'll be trying to do a episode, breakdown of every weekly episode if that's something you guys are interested in. So let me know, and let me know what you guys noticed about the show in terms of preparedness and survival tips and tricks and strategies, and post in the comments below. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will talk to you soon.